Corinne Holloway leveled the shotgun at the man stepping off the noon stage and felt her hands go steady for the first time in 3 years. The drifter had Cole Crawford's shoulders, Cole Crawford's walk, and the same weathered tan coat he wore the morning he rode out of Black Fork without a word. Her finger hovered over the trigger while the stage driver froze mid-step, and 2 merchants stumbled backward into the mercantile doorway. Cole raised both hands, slow and careful, his face shadowed under the brim of his hat. Dust from the stage wheels hung in the September air between them. He did not smile. He did not speak. He simply stood there, hands high, and let her hold him at the end of her barrel. "You got no business here," Corinne said. Her voice came out harder than she felt. The shotgun barrel did not waver. Cole's jaw tightened. His eyes, the same slate gray she remembered, locked on hers. "I got plenty of business here," he said quietly. "Just not the kind you think." The stage driver cleared his throat. "Miss Holloway, maybe we ought to let the man explain before." She swung the barrel an inch toward the driver, without breaking eye contact with Cole. "You want to finish that sentence, Hank?" Hank wisely chose silence. Cole took a single step forward. Corinne cocked the hammer. "Stop right there." He stopped. 3 years, Corinne. 3 years, and you think I'd come back? If it wasn't life or death? "Life or death for who?" she said. "Not for me. Not for this town. You made that plain enough when you left." A woman's voice cut through the tension from the boardwalk. "Corinne, put that gun down before Sheriff Drum hauls you in for threatening a visitor." Corinne did not turn. Her older sister Vera stood in the shadow of the land office overhang, arms folded, her expression cool and faintly amused. Vera wore a tailored gray dress that cost more than Corinne's entire autumn harvest, and her blonde hair sat in perfect coils that never saw a day's real work. "He's not a visitor," Corinne said. "He's a deserter." Vera stepped into the sunlight. Her smile was thin. "Then let him desert again." "You're making a scene, and scenes don't help the family." Corinne finally lowered the shotgun, but she did not uncock it. She kept it angled across her body, ready. Cole lowered his hands, slow, and brushed dust from his coat sleeve. He looked older, harder. There were lines around his eyes that had not been there before, and a scar along his left temple that disappeared into his hairline. "You got 5 minutes, Corinne said. "Then you get back on that stage, or I finish what I started." Cole nodded once. "Fair enough." Vera made a soft sound of disapproval and turned back toward the land office. Corinne caught the faint smirk on her sister's face before Vera disappeared inside. That smirk meant trouble. It always did. Corinne gestured with the shotgun barrel toward the narrow alley between the general store and the apothecary. Cole walked ahead of her, his boots crunching on the dry dirt. The alley smelled of old wood and horse leather. A rain barrel sat at the far end, half empty. Corinne stopped 10 feet from him and kept the shotgun ready. "Talk," she said. Cole leaned against the side of the building and pulled his hat off. His hair was longer than she remembered, sun-streaked and uneven, like he had been cutting it himself with a dull blade. He ran a hand through it and met her eyes. "There's a land syndicate out of Denver," he said. "They're buying up every property they can between here and the rail line. They got lawyers, they got money, and they got men who don't mind breaking bones to close a deal. Black Fork is next." Corinne's stomach tightened, but she kept her face blank. "We heard rumors." "They're not rumors anymore," Cole said. "I saw the contract. They're planning to foreclose on half the town come October. Anyone who won't sell gets buried in legal fees until they got no choice. Your orchard's on the list. So's the livery, the mill, and the land office. Corinne's jaw tightened. The land office. That was Vera's domain, inherited when their father died 2 winters back. Vera had been running it like her own private kingdom ever since, collecting fees and favors with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Why do you care?" Corinne said. "You walked away from all this." Cole's expression darkened. "I walked away because I thought I was protecting you." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "Protecting me? You left me standing in front of Reverend Marsh with half the town watching. You want to call that protection?" Cole flinched. That was the first real crack in his composure. "I couldn't marry you, Corinne. Not then. Not with what I had hanging over me." "What you had hanging over you was a choice," she said. "You chose to leave. I chose to keep you out of a war you didn't start," Cole shot back. His voice rose, rough and strained. "I chose to make sure the men hunting me didn't burn down your orchard looking for me. I chose to let you hate me instead of watching you bury me." Corinne stared at him. Her hands ached from gripping the shotgun. "Men hunting you," she said slowly. "What men?" Cole looked away, jaw working. "Deserters don't get trials, Corinne. They get ropes. I left the army 2 months before Appomattox because my captain ordered us to burn a town full of women and children. I said no. He said I'd hang. So I ran." Corinne's chest felt tight. She had known Cole fought. She had not known he ran. "You could have told me," she said. "And made you an accomplice?" Cole shook his head. "No. I left. I kept moving. I worked under different names, stayed ahead of the bounty hunters, and waited for the war to end and the records to rot. It took 3 years, Corinne. 3 years before I was safe enough to stop looking over my shoulder." She lowered the shotgun another inch. "And now, you're back." "Now I'm back," Cole said. "Because I heard what's coming for this town. And I know you won't leave without a fight. And I know your sister won't lift a finger to stop it if she can profit from the ashes." Corinne's stomach twisted. "Vera." She thought of her sister's cold smile, the land office records that never quite added up, the way Vera always seemed to know which properties were about to fail before anyone else did. "You think Vera's working with them?" Corinne said. Cole nodded. "I know she is. I saw her name on the contract. She's feeding them information. She gets a cut of every foreclosure." Corinne felt the world tilt. She set the shotgun down, leaning it against the wall, and pressed both hands to her face. Vera. Her own sister. The woman who stood beside their father's grave and promised to protect the family legacy. "How do I stop it?" Corinne said. Cole stepped closer. His voice softened. "You don't stop it alone. You fight it with every landowner in Black Fork who's willing to stand together. You take it to the territorial judge. You make enough noise that Denver backs off. And if they don't back off, then you make them regret coming here in the first place." Corinne dropped her hands and looked at him. He was close enough now that she could see the faint scars on his knuckles, the way his collar sat crooked, the exhaustion in his eyes. He looked like a man who had been running for 3 years and finally stopped. "Why should I trust you?" she said. "Because I came back," Cole said. Because I could have stayed gone and you'd never have known what was coming until it was too late. Because I'm asking you to let me help, not because I think it'll fix what I broke, but because it's the right thing to do. She studied his face. There was no charm in it, no easy smile, just raw honesty, and the kind of tired determination that came from surviving things that should have killed you. 5 minutes are up, she said. Cole nodded and reached for his hat. But you can stay, Corinne added. For now. Until I decide if you're lying. Cole's hand froze. He looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. I'm not lying. Then prove it. She picked up the shotgun, uncocked it, and walked past him toward the mouth of the alley. Cole followed, hat in hand, and she did not look back to see if he kept pace. She did not need to. She could feel him there, a presence at her shoulder, solid and steady, in a way that made her furious and relieved in equal measure. They emerged onto the main street. The stage was gone. The townspeople had scattered back to their business, but Corinne caught the weight of eyes on her from every window and doorway. News traveled fast in Black Fork. By sundown, everyone would know Cole Crawford was back, and Corinne Holloway had not shot him. Vera stood on the land office steps, watching them. Her expression was unreadable, but her hands were folded too neatly, her posture too controlled. Corinne felt the cold weight of suspicion settle over her like a winter coat. Corinne crossed the street toward the livery. Cole followed. The stable smelled of hay and horse sweat. Old Samuel, the hostler, looked up from mucking a stall and squinted at Cole. You back for good, or just passing through? Samuel said. Depends on your sister, Cole said, glancing at Corinne. Samuel grunted and went back to his work. Corinne led Cole to the back corner where her wagon sat, the bed loaded with crates of apples from the morning's harvest. She set the shotgun in the wagon and turned to face him. You said there's a contract, Corinne said. Where is it? Locked in a safe at the land office, Cole said. I saw it 2 weeks ago when I was working as a clerk in Denver. They don't know I copied the property list, and they don't know I left. You stole it. I borrowed the information, Cole said. There's a difference. Not to a judge. Good thing we're not planning to get caught. Corinne crossed her arms. We. You're assuming I'm letting you stay. You already did, Cole said, back in the alley. She hated that he was right. She hated that her hands still shook from holding the shotgun. She hated that seeing him again felt like tearing open a wound that had barely scabbed over. I need to see that list, she said. Then we go tonight, Cole said, after the office closes. Vera locks up at sunset and goes home. We'll have maybe an hour before someone notices. And if we get caught? We don't, Cole said. Corinne looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Tonight. Meet me at the orchard gate after dark. Don't let anyone see you leave town. Cole's mouth twitched, almost a smile. You giving me orders now? Someone has to, Corinne said. You clearly can't be trusted to make good decisions on your own. This time he did smile, faint and brief, and it hit her like a punch to the chest. That smile used to undo her. It used to make her forget every sensible thought in her head. Now, it just reminded her of everything she lost. She turned away before he could see her face change. Get out of here, Crawford. I got work to do. Cole left without another word. Corinne stood beside the wagon, hands braced on the rough wood, and tried to breathe through the tightness in her chest. 3 years. 3 years of building a life without him. of convincing herself she was better off, of ignoring the way her heart still tripped when she heard boots on the porch that sounded like his. And now he was back, and everything was falling apart again. She climbed onto the wagon seat, took up the reins, and drove toward the orchard. The road stretched dusty and pale under the noon sun. The orchard sat 2 miles east of town, a patch of green against the dry hills. Her father had planted the first trees 30 years ago, back when Black Fork was just a trading post and a dream. Corinne had spent her childhood climbing those trees, her adolescence learning to graft and prune, and her adulthood fighting to keep them alive through drought and debt. The land was hers now. Her father left it to her, not Vera. Vera got the land office and the town lots. Corinne got the orchard and the hard work that came with it. She never resented the division. She loved the orchard. She loved the smell of apple blossoms in spring, the weight of fruit in her hands come autumn, the quiet that settled over the rows at dusk. But if Cole was right, she would lose it all by October. She reached the orchard gate and climbed down to unlatch it. The trees stood in neat rows, heavy with fruit. She had already picked half the crop, but there were still apples hanging ripe and red in the September sun. Another week, and she would have the rest harvested, crated, and ready for the autumn market. If she still had an orchard by then. She drove the wagon to the small barn at the edge of the property and began unloading crates. The work was hard and familiar. Lift, carry, stack. Her gloves grew damp with sweat. Her arms ached. But the rhythm steadied her, and by the time the sun dropped toward the western hills, she felt almost calm. Almost. She washed her face and hands at the pump, changed into a clean shirtwaist and split skirt, and waited for dark. The house was small, just 2 rooms and a loft. But it was hers. She had built the stone chimney herself the winter after her father died. She had patched the roof, glazed the windows, and planted roses by the door that bloomed every June. She was not going to lose it to a syndicate of Denver lawyers and her own sister's greed. When the sky turned indigo and the first stars appeared, Corinne pulled on her coat, tucked a small knife into her boot, and walked back to the gate. Cole was already there, leaning against the fence post. He straightened when he saw her. "You're late," he said. "I'm exactly on time," Corinne said. "You're early." Old habit. They walked toward town in silence. The road was dark except for the faint glow of lamplight from distant windows. Corinne kept her steps quiet. Cole moved like a shadow beside her, his coat blending into the night. She could hear his breathing, steady and controlled, and the faint creak of his boots. When they reached the edge of town, Cole stopped and put a hand on her arm. "Wait." She froze. A man on horseback rode slowly down the main street, his silhouette black against the saloon lights. Corinne recognized the shape of him. Big shoulders, flat-brimmed hat, the glint of a badge on his chest. Sheriff Drum. "He's making rounds," Cole whispered. "We wait until he turns the corner." They pressed into the shadow of the feed store and watched. Drum rode past the land office, paused to glance at the door, then continued toward the far end of town. When his horse disappeared around the hotel, Cole moved. Now. They crossed the street at a run, boots silent on the packed dirt. The land office sat dark and locked. Cole pulled a thin piece of metal from his pocket and worked it into the lock. Corinne kept watch, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The lock clicked. Cole pushed the door open, and they slipped inside. The office smelled of paper and lamp oil. Moonlight came through the front window, casting faint silver stripes across the floor. Cole moved toward the back room where Vera kept the safe. Corinne followed, her eyes adjusting to the dark. "You know how to open it," she whispered. "I know the model," Cole said. "I worked in a bank once." Long story. He knelt in front of the safe and pressed his ear to the door, fingers working the dial. Corinne stood by the window, watching the street. Her pulse hammered in her throat. If Drum came back, if Vera decided to return for a forgotten ledger, if anyone saw them. The safe door swung open, with a soft metallic groan. Cole reached inside and pulled out a thick folder. He opened it, scanned the pages, and nodded. "This is it." Corinne crossed the room and looked over his shoulder. The contract was dense with legal language, but the property list was clear. Her orchard, Samuel's livery, the mill, the church lot, the schoolhouse, nearly every piece of land in Black Fork that mattered. And at the bottom, in neat handwriting, Vera's signature as co-facilitator. Corinne's hands curled into fists. "That's her handwriting." Cole nodded grimly. "She's been feeding them appraisals, tax records, ownership disputes, anything that makes a property look weak. They pay her a percentage of every foreclosure." "How much?" 20%. Corinne's stomach turned. 20% of the town. 20% of everything their father built. "We need to copy this," she said. "Already planning on it," Cole said. He pulled a small notebook and pencil from his coat and started writing. Names, dates, amounts. His handwriting was fast and neat, the kind of penmanship that came from years of filling out ledgers and forms. Corinne moved back to the window. The street was still empty, but she could hear voices from the saloon, faint and rough. A door slammed somewhere. A dog barked. "Hurry," she whispered. "Almost done." Footsteps. Corinne's heart stopped. She pressed against the wall beside the window and looked out. A figure was walking up the street toward the land office. Tall, broad, carrying a lantern. "Sheriff Drum." "Cole," she hissed. He looked up, saw her face, and closed the notebook. He shoved the contract back into the safe and shut the door. The footsteps grew louder. The lantern light bounced against the storefronts. "Back door," Cole said. They ran through the rear office, past the filing cabinets and storage shelves, and out the back door into the alley. Corinne pulled the door shut just as the front door rattled. They heard the scrape of a key in the lock. Cole grabbed her hand and pulled her into the shadows behind the rain barrel. They crouched low, pressed together, breathing hard. The back door opened. Lantern light spilled into the alley. Sheriff Drum stepped out, holding the lantern high. He looked left, then right. Corinne held her breath. She could feel Cole's heartbeat against her shoulder, fast and strong. The sheriff's boots crunched on the gravel. He walked 3 steps into the alley, then stopped. "Come on out," Drum said. "I know someone's back here." Corinne's hand moved toward the knife in her boot. Cole's fingers tightened on her wrist. A silent warning. "Don't." Drum took another step. The lantern light swung close. Close enough that Corinne could see the edge of the rain barrel's shadow shift. Then a cat yowled, sudden and shrill, and bolted across the alley. Drum cursed and stepped back. The cat disappeared into the dark. Drum muttered something under his breath, turned, and went back inside. The door closed. The lock clicked. Corinne let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in her chest for an hour. Cole released her wrist and stood, pulling her up with him. They did not speak. They moved quickly and quietly through the alleys, keeping to the shadows, until they reached the edge of town. Only when they were back on the open road did Corinne stop and turn to face him. "That was too close," she said. "But we got what we came for," Cole said. He held up the notebook. "Every name, every date, every dollar. Now what?" "Now we take it to the other landowners," Cole said. "We show them what's coming. We organize. And we make sure Vera knows she's not going to win this." Corinne looked back toward town. The lights were distant and small, like fallen stars scattered across the dark. Somewhere in one of those houses, Vera was probably sleeping soundly, counting her future profits. Not anymore. They walked back to the orchard gate together. The night was cool and still. Corinne could smell sage on the wind. And somewhere far off, a coyote howled. "Thank you," she said quietly. Cole looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. "For what?" "For coming back," she said. "Even if I still don't trust you. Even if I'm still angry. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Cole said. His voice was rough. "I owed you that much." "You owe me a lot more than that," Corinne said. "But it's a start." She left him at the gate and walked back to the house. She did not look back. She did not need to. She could feel him standing there, watching her go, the same way she used to feel him watching her when they were young and everything was still possible. Inside, she lit a lamp and sat at the small table. Her hands were steady now. She pulled out a piece of paper and began writing. A list of names: Samuel at the livery, Widow Marsh at the mill, the Kincaid brothers who ran the freight office, every landowner in Black Fork who had something to lose. By dawn, she would have them all gathered. By noon, they would have a plan. And by sunset, Vera would know her secret was out. Corinne worked through the night, writing notes and sealing them with wax. When the first gray light touched the eastern hills, she saddled her mare and rode into town. She left the notes at doorsteps and tucked into fence posts. "Meet at the orchard, noon tomorrow. Come ready to fight." By mid-morning, the replies started coming. Samuel sent word by his stable boy. Widow Marsh walked out herself, her face grim but determined. The Kincaid brothers rode out together, rifles across their saddles. They gathered in the shade of the largest apple tree, a rough circle of men and women who had spent their lives building something worth keeping. Corinne stood at the center, Cole beside her. She held up the notebook. "This is what's coming," she said. "A syndicate out of Denver. They want every piece of land from here to the rail line, and they're using my sister to make it happen. They plan to foreclose on half the town come October. If we don't stand together, we lose everything." There was silence. Then Samuel spoke, his voice gravelly and low. "What do you need from us?" "I need you to refuse to sell," Corinne said. "I need you to show up at the territorial courthouse with me and file a complaint. I need you to make enough noise that Denver knows we're not rolling over. And if they send men to make us roll over," one of the Kincaid brothers said, "then we make sure they regret it," Cole said. His voice was calm and cold. I've seen what these syndicates do. They rely on fear and isolation. They pick off properties one at a time. But if you stand together, if you make it clear you'll fight every step of the way, they move on to easier targets. You talk like you've done this before, Widow Marsh said. I have, Cole said. Twice. Once in Kansas, once in Wyoming. Both times, the landowners won because they didn't break. Samuel studied Cole for a long moment. You're the deserter, he said. The one who left Corinne standing at the altar. Cole did not flinch. I am. And you think we should trust you now? I think you should trust that I know what I'm talking about, Cole said. And I think you should trust that I'm not asking you to do anything I won't do myself. There was a murmur of voices. Then Widow Marsh stepped forward. I'm in, she said. They take the mill, they take my life. I'm not giving it to them without a fight. One by one, the others agreed. By the time the sun reached its peak, Corinne had a coalition. Small, but solid. That night, Vera came to the orchard. Corinne was closing the barn when she heard the horse. She turned and saw her sister riding up the path, side saddle and elegant even in the dusk. Vera dismounted and tied her horse to the fence with practiced ease. You've been busy, Vera said. Corinne crossed her arms. I could say the same about you. Vera smiled. That cold, perfect smile. I heard you had a meeting. I heard you're planning to make trouble. I'm planning to keep my land, Corinne said. That's not trouble. That's survival. Survival is knowing when to let go, Vera said. She stepped closer, her skirts whispering against the grass. The syndicate is offering fair prices, Corinne. More than fair. You could take the money, start fresh somewhere else. Somewhere easier. This is my home, Corinne said. Home is a place, Vera said. And places change. Papa's gone. The orchard's struggling. You're one bad season away from losing it anyway. Why not sell now, while you still have the choice? Because it's mine, Corinne said. And because I know what you're getting out of it. Vera's smile faltered. What are you talking about? 20%, Corinne said. That's your cut, isn't it? Every foreclosure, every forced sale, you get 20%. Vera's face went still. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Vera laughed, light and brittle. You've been listening to your deserter, she said. Cole Crawford shows up after 3 years and suddenly you think I'm the villain? I saw the contract, Corinne said. Your signature. Your handwriting. You've been selling out this town piece by piece. Vera's expression hardened. I've been securing our future. The syndicate is coming whether you fight or not. At least this way, the family gets something out of it. The family, Corinne said. You mean you. Vera took a step forward, her voice dropping to something sharp and venomous. You always thought you were better than me, didn't you? Papa's favorite, the one who loved the land, who worked with her hands, who was too good to care about money or status. But where did that get you, Corinne? Alone in a drafty house with dirt under your nails, and a man who abandoned you. Corinne's jaw tightened. Get off my land. This is family land, Vera said. Half of it should have been mine. Papa left it to me, Corinne said. And I'm keeping it. Vera stared at her for a long moment. Then she turned and walked back to her horse. She mounted in one smooth motion and looked down at Corinne from the saddle. You can't stop this, Vera said. All you're doing is making it harder on yourself. Then I'll make it hard, Corinne said. Vera rode away into the gathering dark. Corinne stood by the fence until the sound of hoofbeats faded. Her hands were shaking again. She pressed them flat against the top rail and breathed slowly, counting the seconds until the anger turned into something she could carry. When she looked up, Cole was standing by the barn, half hidden in shadow. How long have you been there? She said. Long enough, Cole said. He walked toward her, his face unreadable. You all right? No, Corinne said. But I will be. Cole leaned against the fence beside her. They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars emerge. The night was cool and clear, the kind of night that made the world feel bigger than it was. She meant what she said, Cole said quietly. They're not going to stop. I know, Corinne said. And she's not going to forgive you for standing against her. I know that too. Cole turned to look at her. Then why are you doing it? Corinne met his eyes. Because if I don't, I'll lose everything that matters. And I'd rather lose fighting than lose on my knees. Cole's expression softened. There was something in his eyes that looked almost like admiration. Or maybe regret. Or maybe both. I'm sorry, he said. For leaving. For not telling you the truth. For making you think you weren't worth staying for. Corinne's throat tightened. She looked away. I thought I wasn't enough. You were always enough, Cole said. I was the one who wasn't. I was scared, and I ran, and I convinced myself I was doing the right thing. But I wasn't. I just hurt you and called it protection. Corinne felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. Why are you telling me this now? Because I don't know if I'll get another chance, Cole said. And because you deserve to know that leaving you was the worst mistake I ever made. She turned to face him. His face was close, shadowed, and serious. She could see the faint lines around his mouth, the scar on his temple, the way his jaw was set like he was bracing for her to walk away. Instead, she reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, careful and warm. I'm still angry, she said. I know, Cole said. And I still don't trust you. I know that too. But I'm glad you came back, she said. Cole's grip tightened. So am I. They stood there until the cold drove them inside. Corinne made coffee, and they sat at the small table, going over the list of landowners and planning the trip to the territorial courthouse. It felt strange and familiar all at once, working beside him, the way they used to plan their future when the world still felt wide open. By the time Cole left, the moon was high and the night was deep. Corinne watched him walk down the path toward town, his coat collar turned up against the wind. She did not call him back. But she did not lock the gate, either. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Corinne and Cole rode to the courthouse in Silver City, a 2-day journey over rough roads. They filed the complaint, paid the fees, and spoke to a judge who listened with skepticism, but agreed to review the case. It was not a victory, but it was a foothold. When they returned to Black Fork, the tension in town had thickened. Vera stopped speaking to Corinne entirely. Sheriff Drum started watching the orchard with new interest, and rumors began to spread that men from Denver were already on their way. Then the auction notice went up. Corinne saw it nailed to the post outside the land office. Public auction, October 15th. Foreclosure sale for failure to satisfy outstanding liens. Properties included the Holloway Orchard, Samuel's Livery, Marsh Mill, and 6 others. It was a lie. There were no outstanding liens. But the syndicate had manufactured them, forged documents, paid off clerks. And now they were trying to force a sale before the judge could rule. Corinne tore the notice down and rode straight to the orchard. Cole was already there, waiting by the barn. He had seen it too. "They're moving fast," he said. "We've got 2 weeks." 2 weeks to do what? Corinne said. "We filed the complaint. The judge won't rule in time. Then we stop the auction ourselves," Cole said. "How?" "We make sure no one shows up to bid." Corinne stared at him. "You're talking about intimidation." "I'm talking about making it clear that Black Fork doesn't roll over," Cole said. "We spread the word. We let every buyer know that if they try to take land here, they'll spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulder. We make the auction so unprofitable that the syndicate walks away. And if they send enforcers, then we be ready," Cole said. Corinne felt the weight of it settle over her. This was not just about paperwork anymore. This was about drawing a line and daring someone to cross it. "All right," she said. "Let's do it." They spent the next 10 days organizing. Samuel and the Kincaid brothers rode out to neighboring towns, spreading the word. Widow Marsh opened the mill to store supplies. And Corinne turned the orchard into a rallying point, a place where anyone willing to stand could gather. On the night before the auction, more than 30 people camped in the orchard. Farmers, ranchers, shopkeepers, people who had never held a weapon but were willing to learn. Cole moved among them, calm and steady, checking rifles and teaching basic defense positions. He did not make speeches. He just worked. And people followed him because he knew what he was doing. Corinne found him near midnight, sitting alone by the barn. She sat down beside him. "You think this will work?" she said. "I think we've got a chance," Cole said. "A good one. And if we don't, then we lose together," he said. "That's still better than losing alone." Corinne leaned her head against his shoulder. He went still, then slowly wrapped an arm around her. They sat like that for a long time, listening to the murmur of voices and the crackle of campfires. "I never stopped loving you," Corinne said quietly. Cole's arm tightened. "I never stopped loving you either." She closed her eyes and let herself feel it, just for a moment. The warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart, the sense that maybe, just maybe, they could survive this. The morning of the auction came cold and bright. Corinne dressed in her best dress, the dark green one with the fitted bodice, and pinned her hair carefully. If this was going to be a public stand, she would look the part. The auction was set for noon in the yard behind the land office. By 11, a crowd had gathered. Corinne and her coalition stood on one side, silent and watchful. On the other side, a cluster of well-dressed men from Denver, their lawyer, and Sheriff Drum. And in the center, looking perfectly composed, stood Vera. The auctioneer climbed onto a wooden platform and cleared his throat. He began reading the list of properties. Holloway Orchard, Samuel's Livery, Marsh Mill. No one bid. The auctioneer repeated the call. Still nothing. He looked at the Denver men. They exchanged glances. Then one of them stepped forward. $500 for the Holloway Orchard, he said. Before anyone could respond, Cole stepped out of the crowd. I'll bid 1,000. The Denver man turned, eyes narrowing. 1,500. 2,000, Cole said. The man's jaw tightened. 3,000. 5,000. Cole said calmly. There was a ripple of shock through the crowd. 5,000 was more than the orchard was worth. More than anyone in Black Fork could afford. The Denver man stared at Cole, then at the lawyer, who shook his head slightly. The auctioneer looked flustered. Any other bids? Silence. Sold, the auctioneer said reluctantly, to the gentleman for $5,000. Cole walked up to the platform and handed over a promissory note. The auctioneer took it, scanned it, and paled. This note is drawn on a Denver bank. That's right, Cole said. Same bank the syndicate uses. I'd be happy to let them explain how I got access to their funds. The lawyer stepped forward, fury in his eyes. This is fraud. Prove it, Cole said. File a complaint. Take it to court. I'll wait. The Denver men looked at each other. Then, without a word, they turned and walked away. The lawyer followed, stiff with rage. The auctioneer gathered his papers and fled. The crowd erupted in cheers. Corinne stared at Cole. Where did you get that note? I didn't, Cole said quietly. It's a fake. But by the time they figure that out, the judge will have ruled, and the whole auction will be voided. Corinne felt a laugh bubble up, wild and disbelieving. You just bluffed an entire syndicate. I learned from the best, Cole said, grinning. But the celebration was short-lived. That night, the barn caught fire. Corinne woke to the smell of smoke. She stumbled out of bed, threw open the door, and saw flames roaring from the barn roof. She ran barefoot across the yard, screaming for help. Cole appeared from nowhere, grabbed her arm, and pulled her back. It's too far gone, he said. We need to get the horses out. They ran to the corral and opened the gate. The horses bolted into the night, eyes wild with fear. Corinne could feel the heat from the fire, see the sparks flying up into the dark sky. And then she saw movement near the tree line. Someone's out there, she said. Cole followed her gaze. 3 figures on horseback, watching. Then they turned and rode away. It was the syndicate, Corinne said. Or Vera. Or both, Cole said grimly. By the time the townspeople arrived with buckets, the barn was ash. Corinne stood in the wreckage, soot-streaked and shaking. Everything she had stored for winter, the tools, the hay, gone. Samuel put a hand on her shoulder. We'll rebuild. But Corinne was not looking at the barn. She was looking at the orchard. The trees were untouched. The house was safe. And standing beside her was the man who had just everything to stand with her. We're not done, she said. No, Cole said. We're not. The judge's ruling came 3 days later. The auction was voided. The foreclosure documents were deemed fraudulent. The syndicate was fined and barred from further action in the territory. Black Fork had won. But the victory felt fragile. Vera left town the day after the ruling, taking nothing but a trunk and her horse. She did not say goodbye. She did not apologize. She simply vanished, and Corinne did not know if she would ever see her sister again. The townspeople held a celebration in the square. There was music and food, and a bonfire that burned until dawn. Corinne stood at the edge of the crowd, watching, feeling both exhausted and relieved. Cole found her there. He handed her a cup of cider. You did it, he said. We did it, Corinne corrected. He smiled. Fair enough. They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Then Cole spoke, his voice quiet. I need to tell you something. Corinne looked at him. The army dropped the charges, Cole said. I got word yesterday. The records were destroyed in a fire at the War Office. I'm clear. Corinne's chest tightened. So you could go anywhere now. I could, Cole said. But I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you tell me to. She turned to face him fully. And if I don't tell you to, then I stay, Cole said. I rebuild your barn. I help you run the orchard. I do whatever you need me to do. For as long as you'll let me. Corinne felt tears prick her eyes. What about what you need? I need you, Cole said simply. I've needed you since the day I left. I just didn't know how to come back. You came back, Corinne said. That's what matters. She stepped closer. He reached up and cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she had not realized had fallen. I love you, Corinne Holloway, he said. And if you'll have me, I'd like to finish what we started 3 years ago. She smiled through her tears. You mean the wedding? I mean the life, Cole said. The wedding's just the start. Then yes, Corinne said. Yes. He kissed her, slow and careful, like he was afraid she might disappear. She kissed him back, threading her fingers through his hair, holding him close. Around them, the celebration roared on. But Corinne heard none of it. There was only this. Only them. Only the promise of a future they had almost lost. They were married 2 weeks later in the orchard, under the largest apple tree. Reverend Marsh performed the ceremony, the same man who had waited 3 years ago for a groom who never came. This time, Cole stood beside Corinne from start to finish, his hand never leaving hers. The whole town came. Samuel gave Corinne away. Widow Marsh wept quietly in the front row. The Kincaid brothers stood guard at the gate, rifles across their laps, just in case. But no trouble came. The day was clear and bright, and the apples hung red and ripe on the branches. When Reverend Marsh pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd cheered. Cole kissed Corinne like it was the first time, and the last time, and every time in between. That night, they stood on the porch of the little house and watched the stars come out. Cole's arm was around her waist. Corinne leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. You think it'll always be this hard, she said. Probably, Cole said. But we'll face it together. Promise? These are Nord or supposed to be what see us, Celeste around her. Like you mentioned in the story, where there are not him. Their muff place were lost and lost white. Promise? Cone like dranding a tensing out in her. Promise? Cos climb pek most bows. Promise, he said. She turned in his arms and kissed him again, slow and sweet. The night was cool and the orchard was quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. But here, in this small circle of warmth and light, everything was exactly as it should be. The next morning, they began rebuilding the barn. Cole worked alongside Samuel and the Kincaid brothers, hauling timber and hammering planks. Corinne managed the orchard and started planning the winter grafting. Life returned to its rhythms, but everything felt different now. Lighter, more whole. One evening, As they sat on the porch after a long day's work, Corinne leaned her head on Cole's shoulder. "You know what I think?" she said. "What's that?" "I think we're going to be all right." Cole smiled and kissed the top of her head. "I think you're right." And they were. The orchard flourished. The barn rose strong and sturdy. Black Fork settled into a new kind of peace, one built on the knowledge that its people would stand together when it mattered most. And every autumn, when the apples turned red and the air grew crisp, Corinne and Cole would stand under the largest tree and remember the day they chose each other. Not once, but twice. Because some loves are worth fighting for. Some loves are worth coming back for. And some loves, once rekindled, burn bright enough to light the way through any darkness. The seasons turned. Winter came and went. Spring brought blossoms and the promise of new fruit. Summer brought long days of work and laughter. And when autumn returned, the orchard was fuller, richer, more alive than it had been in years. Corinne and Cole worked side by side, harvesting apples and planning for the future. They talked about expanding the orchard, maybe adding peach trees on the south slope. They talked about children, someday, when the time was right. They talked about everything and nothing, the way people do when they know they have all the time in the world. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Cole pulled Corinne into his arms and danced with her in the orchard, humming a tune she did not recognize. She laughed and followed his lead, her feet stumbling over the uneven ground. "Where did you learn to dance?" she said. "I didn't," Cole admitted. "I'm making it up as I go." "Sounds about right," Corinne said. He grinned and spun her, and she felt light and free and impossibly happy. When the dance ended, they stood together in the fading light, holding each other close. The orchard was quiet. The world was wide. And everything they had fought for, everything they had nearly lost, was finally theirs. "I love you," Corinne said. "I love you too," Cole said. "Always have. Always will." And under the apple trees, with the stars beginning to appear overhead, they kissed. Not as strangers finding their way back to each other, not as two people unsure of the future, but as husband and wife, as partners, as two souls who had walked through fire and chosen to stay. Years passed. The orchard grew. Black Fork thrived. And the story of Corinne Holloway and Cole Crawford became the kind of tale people told on cold nights, when they needed to believe that love could survive anything. Because it could. And it did. On their 10th anniversary, they stood once more under the largest apple tree, the same tree where they were married. Cole took Corinne's hand and looked into her eyes. "No regrets?" he said. "Not a one," Corinne said. He smiled. "Good. Because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have any." "You already have," Corinne said. And she meant it. They kissed, slow and sweet, the way they always did. Around them, the orchard hummed with life. The trees were heavy with fruit. The air was warm and golden. And somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark sang. It was a good life, a hard life, a life built on trust and work, and the kind of love that does not come easy but lasts forever. And as the sun set over Black Fork, Corinne and Cole stood together, hand in hand. And watched the world turn beautiful.